We are the Danish Social Innovation Club, a nonprofit organization of volunteers run by both Danish and international students, as well as recent graduates. DANSIC aims to help and inspire different actors in the society to use social innovation and interdisciplinary work for solving current societal challenges, which is what we're basing our case competition off this year, actually. This is this year's team of volunteers. There we go. Everyone in this team is working hard to put on this case competition and these webinars for you guys. So shout out to them for doing an awesome job. Moving on to today's event. Today, we're going to take you through the notions of circular business and the journey of one of our wonderful partners, Wair. We're so excited to have them there, as well as Zablon Wekesa, Regional Coordinator for the African Circular Economy Network and a designer at the Circular Design Nairobi. And we're going to be talking about how we can exactly design for circular economy and what strategies we can employ to that. And we'll also be talking with Wair, and they're going to be taking us through their own circular innovation story and the journey of their textile upcycling from idea to reality. Our first speaker today is going to be Zablon Wekesa. He is the regional coordinator for, like I said, African Circular Economy Network and the organizer for CEC Nairobi chapter and founded the UON bike share program. He also is a designer at the Circular Design Nairobi and employs a variety of research methods to create actionable insights and provide improvements to products and processes for users. He strives to empathize with the user as fully as possible and communicate their goals, wants, needs in order to create a product that truly serves the user. He has spoken and facilitated workshops at conferences and universities, and recently was a part of the team of authors for an EU report on circular economy. Wekesa has a clear view on how his ideal society would look like, and he doesn't hesitate to act on it. His strength lies in his broad knowledge on circular economy and his never-ending perseverance and his enthusiasm, which is contagious. So we can't wait to meet him and listen to what he has to say.
One of the most important things about circularity in our context is we are really at that region of growth where we're looking at a lot of value chain reorientment. So for instance, the agricultural value chain, we're looking at a lot of upstream activities as well as downstream activities. So upstream, we're looking at really new post the agricultural the agricultural revolution. We are looking at a lot of pressure in terms of food production, and we had scaled so far off from the place where we're looking at organic fertilizer, and we're now in the region of chemical fertilizer. And what are the effects of this on the environment? So where I sit right now in Western Kenya, we're seeing a lot of deforestation and just the loss of topsoil. And if you've had conversations about Lake Victoria, you've also heard about the challenges that we are facing with the fertilization of the lake. So we have a lot of the top nutrients moving into the lake, and changing the biodiversity there. So in context, we are facing challenges in terms of design of crop varieties, where in the same region again we've had a lot of the natural self-propagating kind of food crops changed into hybrids that don't necessarily self-propagate, and the people, and in terms of food security, it's a huge pressure in our context. So these are conversations that are happening on a circular design level, I'd say, right? But the good thing about design is you don't have to look at design from just, a creative's perspective. There are so many people who are making design decisions across value chains. You have, for instance, you have a teacher who's teaching school kids, but he's making a lot of design decisions in terms of what really what he instills in terms of, in terms of perceptions in those young learners. You're looking at a village headman, for instance, who's just making decisions about how to give up permits for people to cut trees. What happens when you choose to, fence or subdivide or zone your property. So on a very basic level, we're seeing design decisions being made. So how do we come in and look at a system-wide approach to design or to decisions or to certain interventions around circularity? So my presentation today is just focused on food systems. But before I dive into the specific use case, I'll just walk you through certain scenarios where I've interacted with, circular design in my journey, and, where opportunities are currently. So according to the African Development Bank's recent report, and this has been done in collaboration with Dalberg, currently in Africa, or in our context, in the region, we're looking at 5 opportunity areas. So we're looking at business and construction. So in terms of business and construction, this directly impacts on designers. So we have a lot of interior designers, and we have a lot of architects, we have a lot of urban planners, we have a lot of material designers who are grappling with, the opportunity in terms of the rise in population and the hunger for urbanization. So we have a huge pressure in terms of materials, and beyond the challenges that you hear about in our context, beyond the, you can hear me? Beyond the challenges you hear about in our context, wood and furniture have been the most resilient industries in the region. So we have a lot of conflict, right, that is happening in the East Africa region. But you can imagine that, wood and furniture has been the most resilient. So what is driving this sector? It's the urbanization. So just the sheer pressure that we have in context, we're seeing a lot of, and the adaptation of the Victorian furniture kind of households. We're seeing a lot of we're seeing a lot of demand for wood. So how do we as designers who are working in interiors, who are working in space, as architects, now start slowly rethinking that narrative and bringing in, the conversation about minimalist furniture? I'd be really thrilled to see the likes of IKEA, kind of come to that commodity kind of level here, because IKEA here is a very high-end furniture. What we have is a lot of carpenters just making these bulky sofas, and they stay for a long time. They occupy a lot of space. So in terms of just rethinking, how we make our built environment, the demand for sand. The demand for sand, if you Google, is one of the causes of conflicts in the region. And we have a huge demand for construction in context. When you look at these urban townships, there's a huge demand for pipes for water. And we've also seen a very thriving context now where we're having people who are recycling PVC and, you know, extruding new pipes. And this is where, again, a huge opportunity for the circular economy is, where we're seeing more than, you know, 75% of the materials that are being used to make pipes actually regrind. So this is recycled PVC, and PVC is one of those most marketable or plastic materials now on market. So I'd share that one case study for construction. Now I'll walk you through the next opportunity area, which is electronic, I'd say consumer electronics, right? Because we have a huge outburst in, you know, e-waste. So as much as we are attributing e-waste from, you know, the West, we're actually having a new kind of e-waste that's coming from the East, China. As we electrify real fast, we're also having a huge demand, you know, the diversification of our entertainment kind of outfit. You know, we have mobile phones, we have earphones, we have a lot of these. And they don't run short of the obsolescence culture. So these are 3 months, 2 months things. For instance, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, I bought a charger. This charger only lasts for 2 weeks, then it was dead. Yeah, and I've bought such chargers for a while. Now, if you look at an average household, you know, you are spending a little bit of money, you're spending $1 to buy a charger, right? But in a span of 6 months, you've gone through more than 7 chargers. So it's kind of designed to just last for a few days or just to get you by. Now, what do we do with such kind of electronics or such kind of cables? You know, we're having a huge pressure in terms of these, not necessarily from the West, but from the East, which don't last. So it's a conundrum really, and it's an opportunity for designers. So in my context, I'd say we're also looking at, you know, collaborating with a number of, you know, artists to play around and see how we can make jewelry out of that. But the opportunity really lies in repurposing and maximizing the potential in these technologies. If it's possible for you to use your phone to, you know, run a water and irrigation system post its end of life, then that's where we're talking about. Now, we're also facing a huge challenge in terms of the repair economy, because there's that promise that we're able to access really fast fashion in terms of electronics. These are electronics that come cheap but don't last. So we forget that, you know, they can be repaired. And unfortunately, we are now into the culture of consuming, and it's very hard for you now to find also reliable repair people. It might also be attributed to the fact that technology is really fast moving. Yeah. So the repair people are not up to speed, but that's a huge opportunity area. Now there's another opportunity area in textiles. Fast fashion has really affected us there in terms of now textiles. There are clothes from the West. They're really good. And people are also now, through media and awareness, you know, we are accustomed to global brands. We want Tommy Hilfiger, you know, we want Gucci real fast, and we want it cheap. And when you get something cheap, it will last for 2-3 weeks. You know, you wash it 1 or 2 times, it's faded. Now you'll go get a new one. So textiles are responsible for a very huge microfiber release into the water streams and into our soils, in microplastics and stuff. Now, how do we attack that area as how can we attack that as an opportunity area, right? Yeah, I've seen people who are making duvets. I've seen people who are making new threads. I'll just walk you through the two remaining opportunity areas real quick. Look at food systems. Food systems are a huge opportunity area. I'll dive into it with this use case. Then I'm going to look at plastics. Plastics as an opportunity area is real huge. Why? Because it kind of cuts across most of these sectors. When you look at construction, there is plastics. When you look at mobility, there's plastics. Consumer electronics, there's a lot of plastics. Food. Now, food and agriculture is where plastics come in the most because of delivery of products to the market and that perception of freshness. So currently there's a huge opportunity around coming up with a packaging standard. We have an extended producer responsibility app, but we're also looking at opportunities to now deepen that kind of systematic approach into, you know, plastics. So packaging, delivery of products to people. Yeah, we're looking at also post recovery of that packaging. How do we recover the packaging? On a household level, we haven't had any behavior to kind of recover plastics beyond the waste management system, and the waste management system is super porous. So those are the 5 opportunity areas. We're looking at food systems, we're looking at e-waste, we're looking at wood, this construction, and with a focus on wood and furniture. We're looking at plastics, and we're looking at textiles, right? So I'm going to walk you through a use case that is super exciting for a reason. Because I've really worked on it for a while, and it's one of those that really introduced me to the circular economy as, you know, a student in campus. So if you can just take me back to the first slide. Yeah, so this is a huge opportunity. Informal food systems in Nairobi appear almost like street food. As you can see from the background photo, they're like shanty setups, but the opportunity is this: almost 1 in 7 people in the city attest to have had food in these setups. And they also play a super important role because they feed off the food waste from the formal food systems. And, you know, they quickly convert the food that will have gone to waste into quick available lunches. So when faced with the challenge of, you know, food waste in Nairobi, we sat down with my team and we were like, but in a hungry context, no food is wasted. So here we were looking at, you know, how can we now make it more convenient and rethink the design of those informal food setups so that it's a much more, you know, a much more smoother perspective. Because on one level, the informal food vendors don't own the food spaces because they work on road reserves. On another front is the food that they provide is very friendly in terms of pricing, and it's really preferred. But at the same time, the ambience is really sketchy because of the lack of investment or or the perception around investing in something that you don't own. So it's a commons culture. I'd actually just prefer mobile cooking kitchens, and benches, as opposed to, formal structures. So we were looking, these are systems, that we have these informal food vendors cook food, then it's delivered by bicycles, and it's distributed by order. So it's kind of an Uber Eats for these informal food setups. And we can go to the next setup, this slide. Yeah, so you can imagine you're an office cleaner, right? And you're working in an office setting. Now, whatever you make, you cannot be able to afford food that is in that office block, because it's almost 3/4 of what you make in a day per plate. But you have an opportunity to have a plate of food for less than $1 a day. So for us, this is the opportunity area that we're looking at. So how can we look at this really fresh food from our formal market and quickly convert it into lunches, and distribute it at a very low cost to where it's needed the most, and, kind of solve 1 or 2 or 3 problems at the same time. So we're solving the food problem, and we're solving the lack of food problem, and we're also solving the food waste problem, and we're also trying to also cut down on GHG emissions. So this product service system. So the bicycles are actually also a pool that we own, and currently we're really into this. We're having conversations with a number of people who are abandoned bike shares. So we're looking at opportunities to bring this infrastructure that's dormant somewhere else to the country, and try to run it for this kind of setup. But at the same time, we're really working closely with authorities and stakeholders to make sure that, either when you cook in this informal food setups for 4, 5, or 6 months, you're actually given some certification. Yeah, you're actually given certification. Then there's also an opportunity for policy. And there's a huge opportunity around cook stoves, briquettes. So how can we bring this consortia of technologies to kind of work for this informal food setup that plays a really critical role in eliminating food? Walk you through like an experience map. Just the next slide. So beyond all that, this is the interface now that the customer is experiencing. So from our context, how smooth we want the experience to be is, you as an office worker, this is your kind of interaction. So beyond what is happening in the background, going to source for food in informal food markets, the bicycles, the delivery people, and the people who are cooking, this is the actual experience that an office worker interacts with. So it's that seamless and that smooth. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm glad we finally were able to put it up for you. So thank you so much. Let's see. So now I think we're going to move on to Wair's presentation. We've been delayed a little bit, so we're going to put the Q&A all together right at the end of the presentation, where Zablon, Lili, and Emma will answer all the questions in the Q&A. So as of right now, we'll welcome Lili and Emma from Wair to give their presentation. Hey guys, thanks for
Hello.
joining.
Of course, thanks for having us. We'll just try to share our screen here. Hopefully it works. Can you see the screen?
Yes. Yep, the floor is yours.
That's awesome. Okay, we'll get right to it then.
Yeah, great. So we are Wair. We are Lili and Emma. Lili is the founder of Wair and the CEO, and I am the designer and co-founder. And basically we're here to talk about a circular innovation story. So the story of Wair, I don't know how many of you guys know Wair already, but we are a upcycling startup where we use textile waste to create scalable products. Right now, our focus is on shoes. So we have these sneakers, but for the future, we also want to create clothing. And basically, just to, Lili is a big sustainability nerd, and I really love upcycling. So it's a great match. So basically, we're just going to take you through our stories, both our personal stories, but also Wair's story, and also end up with, with a little more social story about what I also do on the side.
Yes, so we have a lot to get through, and we hope it's exciting for everyone.
Just remember also ask questions if you have any.
Put them in the Q&A, and then I guess we'll take them in the end, Sienna. But yeah, hopefully you guys have a lot of questions. We would love to hear them at least. So we'll start with just a little bit about textile waste, circular fashion, and upcycling in general, because we think that's important since that's the whole foundation of Wair and what we're doing. I guess a lot of you are super interested and excited about circular economy, which is why you're here. So we're super excited about circular economy in general, but especially within the textile industry. So of course, we want to have a more sustainable fashion industry, which is why we have to transform from a linear fashion system to a more circular fashion system. And what that means is that we create no waste, that our fashion system don't create any waste. But unfortunately, we're very far away from that. Actually, right now, less than 1% of all textiles being produced are actually being recirculated back into the fashion system, so made into new clothing, which is, of course, very devastating numbers when you think about how many resources it takes to create, for example, just a t-shirt or a pair of jeans. So we want to, of course, get this number much, much higher. Of course, the overall goal is that we can actually close this tap. So imagine a tap of water running, but instead of water, it's textile waste. So of course, our long-term goal, or the society's long-term goal, should be to turn off this tap so there is no textile waste. But it's also really important that while we close this tap, because unfortunately that's not something that just happens overnight, we really need to focus on also finding solutions to all the textile waste that is still going to be there, and we have to figure out how can we recirculate that. So that leads us to our next point, which is the options we have for recirculating textile waste. And you can see out here to the right, we have the different circular textile waste management strategies. So of course we have reuse on the top, and then we have upcycling right below reuse. And upcycling, which we think is the coolest thing ever, basically means, I guess quite a few of you already know, but just for the ones who doesn't, it means to transform a waste material into a new product that has either the same or higher value. And the reason why we think it's so cool is because it's right below reuse. Of course, reuse will always be the best solution, but unfortunately, there's a lot of textiles that cannot be reused. For example, let's say it's a shirt or some jeans with a hole in it. It has a stain. It could be all the textile scraps and leftovers from production, or for example, clothing with production mistakes. These imperfect textiles can't be reused, and this is why upcycling becomes the best solution, and is also a great solution to actually use the fabric as it is. We don't have to break it down and make it into a new material. We can actually use it as it is, which means we're of course saving a lot of resources, but we're also diverting textile at high quality from incineration and landfill, for example. But although it's so cool, because this sounds really cool, right? Upcycling is unfortunately still I would say, the underdog when it comes to the circular fashion agenda, which is because it's really difficult to make scalable. So upcycling is often seen as something, you know, for runways and for celebrities, and something that you make in really small quantities. And that's why people don't see it as a proper solution to the textile waste problem. So that's kind of what we want to try to solve with Wair. We want to try to make textile upcycling scalable, and we want to prove that it is possible and it actually can be a solution for textile waste. I hope everyone is following along so far. Remember just to put your questions down in the Q&A. But now that was a lot of talk about upcycling in general. Now we'll get down to the Wair part and take you through how we went from idea to reality. So how we went from this weird looking sneaker on the top, which was our very, very first prototype, to the sneaker that we have in the bottom. So of course, now we've been around for over 2 years, so it would take a very long time if I had to walk through it step by step. So instead, I'm just going to pull out some different lessons, circular lessons learned throughout the journey of Wair. So 2018 was not the year we started. That was the year where I did a lot of research on textile upcycling. I actually wrote my thesis about how to make it scalable, which was really great. And I think that was where I learned the importance of kind of finding your passion and really you're finding your purpose, and really using the opportunities that you have while you study or your free time to actually deep dive into this passion, and just using every opportunity you get to find out as much about this as possible. So I used my master's, both my thesis, but also the whole duration of the program, to really do a lot of interviews with companies that are working with upcycling, but also to actually do analysis and go out and see this textile waste with my own eyes. So I think that was a really great opportunity. In 2019, that was where we started Wair, when we got into a startup program. And that was amazing. I think that was the year where we kind of like took a leap of faith, just tried it out, see what actually happens. We had an idea, we had this weird prototype, and then we just have to test, you know, do people actually think this is a problem that's worth solving, and does anyone actually want to buy our solution? And I think the lessons I learned here in terms of circularity is, you know, especially when you work with textile waste, the textiles are not made to actually be recirculated at the other end, which means that it's really difficult to work with. And it means that the factories, for example, that we talked with, they didn't want to work with us because they were saying, you know, like, but this, you know, this is textile waste. We can only work with it, you know, for example, if it's recycled, you know, if you come with some new textiles that might be made from waste, but it's like in these big rolls of fabric. So I think for us, we got a lot of no's. And I think in general, when you're working with waste, the system is kind of, you have to change the whole system. So the system will not be ready for you, which means that you have to kick in a lot of doors. So I think a lesson we learned here is definitely just to not take no for an answer, just because it hasn't been done before, especially within circular economy and working with waste, doesn't mean it can't be done. You just have to try to convince the people that it actually can be done. And in 2020, that was where we actually finally launched our sneakers, which was amazing. I think lots of lessons learned here, because that was where we actually did our very first production round. But I think one of the most important things was that, you know, like, you can't, like, you have to just start before you're perfect, because there were so many unknowns, because this really hasn't been done before. Then there's a lot of things that you actually don't know how you will solve this in reality. But we did the crowdfunding campaign, we sold the shoes, and then we just had to figure out, okay, so how do we actually produce these? And there was a lot of issues. Of course, Corona came, which made it difficult, but also with getting the textiles actually, and how do they actually transform it into the shoes? I think there was a lot of unknowns. So it was a lot about like building the plane while we were actually flying it. So I think it's important to kind of like accept that you can't know anything, prepare as much as possible. But at some point when you prepared as much as you can, you just have to take a leap of faith and then do it and figure it out, as long as, you know, while you're doing it. So yeah, now in 2021, now we have to find product market fit, become a proper business, and actually scale our sales, which is very exciting. Have learned a lot of lessons, but I think we'll save that until the end of 2021 before we can make some proper ones. So I think now Emma will share her story.
Yeah, so basically I've always really loved all the creative things, sewing and drawing, painting, but I don't think that's where like my design and sustainability interest came. It's when I started at my studies as a sustainable fashion designer, and I really got an insight to the fashion industry and how bad it really is. It's not really this pretty picture, but there are so many downsides and so much both clothing that is being produced and not being sold but burned instead or end up in landfills, but also just so much waste generally, but that's why I started like doing many projects where I actually started using upcycling as my main like for all my assignments, and basically also in my bachelor thesis I worked with hospital textiles, because I found out there was like 1,300 tons of textiles within a year just in the Copenhagen area, and it really shook me. Like, that was a lot of textiles, and I saw it, and a lot of them were not even like that destroyed, or just had a little rip, or the thread had gone up or something. So I wanted to find a solution of like how to use these textiles, and also because, you know, like it's much cheaper for the government to just, you know, buy new hospital textiles than actually having to fix them, because that's much more expensive. And so I wanted to go into the whole material development. Could I use these materials to actually develop a new material? I looked into natural dyeing and did a lot of experiments, but I actually found out that the material is best in its the very same condition that it's been made. So that's why I stayed within upcycling. And right now, I joined Wair in 2020, so I've been part of Wair for a year now. And as you can see here, the shoe, our new limited collection, we just put in orders for production, and it's my very first design in Wair. And of course there are coming many designs within clothing, so we can actually use even more of the waste that we have, and also the waste that we have within our production.
Emma's already working on some new cool projects. Yeah, so I guess my story is a little bit different. I think for me, I've had, like, apart from football, I've had like two main interests like growing up. I think one of them was fashion. After I watched a lot of Project One Way, I got really into fashion. Yeah. Yeah, Emma watched Project One Way as well, and that meant I started sewing. I got a sewing machine. I was really not into actually using money on buying fabric, so instead of doing that, I just used you know, like my friends and family's old clothes and textile waste, and that was kind of like where my passion for upcycling, I think, really developed. And then on the side, I was also very, very much into sustainability. As Emma said, I'm a sustainability nerd. I think I had like a quite clear like wake up moment when I was watching An Inconvenient Truth, like Al Gore's documentary in primary school. I watched that, and I think, you know, like watching, you know, the polar bear suffering and watching the ice melting, I think that really made a huge impact for me and kind of like paved the way for me having kind of like my purpose in life being to do something good for the planet. So that meant those two kind of like combining into realizing that the fashion industry is not sustainable, but I really want to do something sustainable. So how can I do that? So that meant that after I finished my bachelor, which was very classic CBS, Copenhagen Business School, doing, you know, project management studies, so very classic, I decided that I wanted to do something else with my master's. I really wanted to focus on sustainability. So I searched on Google, which you can see in the middle when I put that one in, Master, Sustainability, Entrepreneurship, and I found a master's at Brunel University in London. where I could study the combination of sustainability, entrepreneurship, and design. And that was where, as I also mentioned previously, I used every opportunity I got to actually build the foundation of Wair, which was why Wair could actually start. So yeah, that was my story. I hope it's interesting also to hear our personal stories. We thought it would be cool not just to be like, oh, Wair did this and this, but how did we actually get into, you know, upcycling and what we're doing now.
Yeah, so basically the sneaker is, as you have heard, very sustainable. We work within circularity, and it's made from textiles, which we get from our textile partners, Elis and Y7 Jeans and Salvation Army, and now also Europcar, working with others, but can't reveal that yet. And what we love about it, like our shoes, they come in such different variations. So the blue denim is not always the same blue, and that's also what we love about it. Like, even though we make it scalable, you know, you can't really get the same product because it's different, the textiles that we keep using. Other than that, it's made, like, the laces are 100% recycled cotton. And we also use the soles are there are 70% recycled rubber soles and then 30% virgin, because it's not possible to have it 100% recycled because of the quality. So that's also something we have to consider in the development. So basically we got offered at some point like a sole where it was made from rubber and hair, and we're like, okay, but is this sustainable? And they told us that no, you know, it was just cool, it looked cool. So we have to consider these things, like, what is it actually that are put in the soles? Is it like, and what's the most sustainable? So is it actually plastics or rubber or something else? So we keep, like, looking into new materials to keep making the product better. Our insoles are made from natural latex and tencel, and of course we have, you know, like, there are usually 40 steps within making a shoe, but with this one we have as little trim as possible. So we actually have our own, instead of, you know, the, what's it called, the
metal eyelets?
Yeah, the metal eyelets. We have our own little zigzag here, so that when we actually take it back from our customers, we can recirculate it into new soles and use the whole shoe. And that's also something that, like, one of our visions, that, you know, it's going to be great when we actually receive some shoes back, because we haven't tried this yet, but we want to, or we have this take back program where people can send their shoes back and we can put it back into production and actually make something out of them again. And of course that's something that's going to be great working with in the future, and also keep, like, trying to make it even more sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, so the power of upcycling, I think by now you probably understood that we think upcycling is very, very, very cool. But some of the reasons why we think it's so cool is because you can use it for so many things, and you can do so many great things with upcycling. So, for example, as I said in the beginning, it's normally seen as these, like, unique, one-of-a-kind pieces, which is not a bad thing, because you can make some really cool fashion items out of textile waste. For example, the one to the left, or this cool top that's made from
statement pieces.
Yeah, really cool statement pieces. This one is made from hats, which is also super cool. We've also tried to do workshops, because we think upcycling is also a great way to actually include the consumers in the actual process, so they can get their hands on the textile waste and use their creativity to make these unique fashion items, which we also had, like, huge success with. I think people really, really love it, also with the rise of the experience economy and the need for customization. This really kind of, like, works well with what people want at the moment. And then on the right you see our shoes, because of course we also believe that upcycling can become scalable, and that's what we want to prove that it can become. So now we're just going to tell you, we're going to want to do a little deep dive into 2 stories about why upcycling is cool. One of them being scalability, and the other one being using upcycling for social good. So I'm just going to start with scalability. First of all, starting out with why it's difficult to actually make textile upcycling scalable. And the reason is that, first of all, they don't really go well together, those 2 terms. So textile waste, which in its essence is very unstandardized. You know, when you go into these textile waste sorting places, it's you know, a complete chaos situation in terms of, like, you know, there's a blue t-shirt and black jeans and a red shirt, and, you know, everything is not really sorted because they just get it in from all these different channels. And then on the other side, we have, you know, scalability and standardized production, which really works by just being able to standardize and automate every single little step to 100%. So these 2 things don't really normally go together. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fit this otherwise chaotic input material into the current production methods, so we can actually unlock the key to scalability. So how we do it, of course, you know, it's going to take a lot of time to explain exactly how we do it, but I think overall what we do is that we try to standardize it as much as possible. For example, we standardize the input material by choosing the textile waste streams that are the most standardized. So for example, we work a lot with jeans and workwear, as Emma has said, because we can get that in more standardized quantities and qualities than, for example, if we were choosing t-shirts. Then we also redesign the product in terms of the actual textile waste. So when you normally design, as I think Emma can also nod to, is that what you say? She can agree on that, you know, like the normal design process maybe starts with trends, or it starts with customer demands, or it starts with like an idea with the designer, where I think for us, it's a lot about reversing that and actually starting with the textile waste and seeing what is this and how can we make the best of this, and how can we make a product that can actually use this textile waste in the best way possible. And then of course it's a lot of just like continuous improvement and simplification, looking at every single little step. It's not just like one fix that we have to do to make it scalable. It's looking at the whole process and figuring out at every single step, how can we tweak so we can make it more scalable. And then it's a lot about finding the right partners, because circular economy and in general, you know, upcycling is a whole system change if you want to make that scalable. And in order to make a system change, you can't, or at least it's very difficult to make it alone, especially if you're a small startup. So I think identifying the right partners has been key to us, both in terms of the factory, in terms of our textile waste partners, but also we've created a network for other companies working with textile upcycling, so we together can, you know, like solve some of the challenges that we're facing, because the challenges can sometimes be so big that you can't solve it as a little startup. But maybe if we go together, we can, because there is a huge, you know, huge interest from everyone, you know, like the governments, the overall, like on a global level, to actually find solutions to all this textile waste. Yes. Oh yeah, and this was just I thought we were going on to Emma's part, but this is just a little behind the scenes, because, you know, it can sound so fancy. Oh yeah, we're trying to make it scalable, and we are, but it's also that, you know, the journey to scalability is often, you know, very manual and very just doing what it takes to actually get to the point where you can become scalable. So to the left is just our little temporary storage at my dad's living room. That was when we did the crowdfunding campaign last year. And to the right is a quite recent picture where we're cutting textiles to make them ready for upcycling.
And it was like taken a month ago or something.
Yeah, very new,
limited
very
collection.
New. It was good weather that day.
So on another note, how you can use some of the textiles or clothing that's left in the industry. I didn't say it before, but I also spent 8 years in East Africa growing up, which is why I also really have a passion for this. I'm a board member at Designers Without Borders Denmark, and we basically we take clothing or samples that Danish designers can't sell, and then we send it to South Africa because we're not allowed to sell it here in Denmark, and then we raise money to have these programs where we educate vulnerable, mostly females in low income areas, and it's placed or it's based near Cape Town, in a small place called Hjortdal. Why we do this is to make a positive change for these females or males that also started joining last year, and we give them an opportunity to actually get an education and not just, you know, stay at home, have children, but we give, like, we teach them about entrepreneurship and how they can actually use some of these resources in their local area. And during Corona, it's been a really tough time because we haven't been able to do our fundraising, but we also had to, like, some of the programs have been cut short, or not as many people have shown up because it's a bit different. I guess this is also very globally, people from all over the world, but they haven't been able to show up for the classes during these programs. So we actually started making this soup kitchen where we could also give people in the local area food. And also we got a lot of new partners that donated both food and and basically how we do this is funding from CISU and the fundraising, and the clothing that we don't have, like, we can't sell at the fundraising is something that we use. So during Corona, we used it for making face masks so that we could protect more people in the local area. But also if the females and the women have any, like, things that they would like to try and do. So the things that we can't sell, we can use it for something else. Yeah.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat. I love your
so
comments.
the future of Wair. So first of all, we need a new name. We were contacted by a big brand that don't want us to use the name Wair. So first of all, we have to do that, and pretty soon.
That's
within this
near future.
Yeah. Then we are making new products, mostly clothing products, but also, of course, accessories, and looking into developing more shoes, more sustainable shoes. And then our big vision is saving even more textiles. We have a goal of saving 1,000 kilos of textiles, so 1 ton. But of course, as much as we can save is just,
yeah, that's our first goal. That's kind of like our big milestone that we want to achieve.
And of course, being 100% circular, so we can use everything again after it has been to the customer, but also use everything that we have left over in production. But of course, this is a never-ending journey. So we have to keep on trying, and you know, the times are changing all the time. So we're just doing everything we can to be circular, more sustainable, and create great products.
Yeah. I think in general, like, it's just, you know, we'll never, you know, I think we'll never settle and be like, okay, yeah, now we're as sustainable as we can get. I think as the world is also constantly evolving, there will always be new ways to become more sustainable, and I think that's what we're pursuing. Yeah, so that was it for us. I unfortunately hadn't looked at the chat along the way, but I could just see that people are writing that they love Project Runway and they can relate to using their parents' place for storing their things. So yeah,
those were awesome both from me. I can really relate to that. So thank you for mentioning it. Awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much. That was such an interesting presentation, and we're so happy to hear about your journey and how great that you guys are doing in creating a more circular future. So let's just go ahead and jump right into our Q&A session. First, we have a question for Zablon. So if you are ready to answer, our first question is, when thinking about circular design, what makes it so hard to be implemented by all companies?
Well, for one, the world has been operating on this concept the 1930s, post First World War, Second World War, of designs of planned obsolescence. So we're really looking at we're creating an opportunity to constantly, buy products from a certain company, and that's how the company survives. For instance, we have a really good use case around planned obsolescence. When you look at, certain phone brands, when you look at fashion items, for instance, we have certain fashion items that you can only wear them for a season. So if you are a designer and that's what your paycheck depends on, and you want now to get rid of that, then it's kind of like working against your own interests, because now how will they pay you if you don't sell? And if you create things that are never going to be replaced, then there's a possibility that you're designing yourself out of a job. So there's that conundrum. That's the difficulty around, I think that's the hard thought about, circular design. Because when you're looking at circular design, we're looking at designing in terms of fashion. We're designing, we're saying, let's design items that last longer, right? And they're also tougher. But, we are looking at an area where you're buying each season you're buying certain pieces of clothing. Now, if you don't buy them for all those seasons, why will they retain you as a designer in the industry? So it's a really hard conversation, right? Then we also have certain dynamics that are happening in terms of policy, in terms of just, challenges around value chains. Certain value chains, like the plastics one, it's really hard for you to recover materials, because when you just look at certain stakeholder setups downstream, it's really hard for you to recover material at its highest quality possible, because of the number of hands it changes and the cost it develops. So in such contexts, the thought is just abandoned. But it's possible to kind of recover materials at the highest value possible and maintain them. Even on a case of e-waste, when it comes to software, repurposing software as opposed to downcycling it, it's just possible. But there's an associated cost of training and technology and upskilling those downstream workers. They're mostly informal workers that are actually dealing with really high level technology when it comes to e-waste. So how do you bridge that gap? So it's possible. It's just a very hard conversation right now that requires a lot of honesty.
Yeah, definitely a conversation that we need to be having, hopefully soon, like you said. Okay, thank you very much. Our next question is going to be for Emma and Lili. Let's see. The question is it challenging to gather good textile waste that can be used to make the Wair sneakers? And what does this process kind of look like when you're looking for textiles to make your awesome sneakers?
I think it's definitely difficult. Like it's not something where you just go out and then you just find the perfect, textile waste. I think in general, it's what you call an invisible market, right? It's not something where, the companies just scream out loud about what textile waste they have. Normally it's actually something that they would rather want to keep quite close to themselves. So it is a lot about kind of like, finding your way through that invisible market and making the right context and finding the right textile partners. I think as soon as you do get that breakthrough and get a contact to the right people, then I don't want to say it's easy to get the right textile waste, as the question is also about.
There's also a lot of bad textile waste.
Exactly. So it's first of all getting that contact to the right textile partners, and then identifying what is it that we can actually use. Because as we also mentioned, it's for us, it's very important that it's semi-standardized at least, so we don't get something in all the different colors, but we can get something that we can get in approximately the same colors and qualities. So there's definitely quite a bit of, you know, finding that. But when we have found that, it's not too difficult, but getting to that point is definitely something that takes a lot of time and commitment to get to that point.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully we can get to that point, you know, making more shoes like yours and getting to use that textile waste in a circular manner. So yeah, thank you.
I think it's also about creating like an infrastructure, you know, so it's, you know, one thing is to create that we have created that, but also others, it should be easier for others also to create.
Which is why we also made the network, so we could actually, people that work with textile waste, we can work together and find the textile waste together.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, let's see. Our next question is going to be for Zablon. The question is, can plastics be circular when they are only downcycled and not recycled?
Well, I'd say for one, it's possible to have circularity in the plastics industry. Yeah, the conversation here is to make sure that, you know, you keep recovery at the highest value possible, so that, you know, it's food grade. It's food grade kind of, the plastic recovered is food grade. You know, you can feed it back to the system, you know, and make products. You know, there are a number of processes in terms of, you know, recycling that happens, and recycling is one of those like really low value. It's in terms of circularity, we put it at, you know, there are other ways, you know, that we can look at, you know, circularity around plastics. You know, for instance, just direct reuse. If we can just repurpose those, you know, the plastic that is collected and use it as is in other, you know, industries, or just minimize the amount of plastic, you know, that is coming, that is being turned into, you know, packaging material, you know. And in terms of plastics, we also have different types of plastics. You know, we have, you know, PP, we have HDP, you know, we have those kind of plastics that are really valuable in terms of the need, or beyond just the theoretical concept of it's recyclable. They're actually really recyclable and they're on demand. Then the other plastics that are super problematic, because you might look at the chasing arrow, it shows that it's actually recyclable, but in theory it is, but practically it's too costly just to, you know, work on it. So plastics is one of those areas that we need to be a bit careful in terms of how we approach it. And that's why there's also a suggestion of, you know, looking at alternative materials and looking at alternative methods of delivery of products. For instance, if you can do away with thin film gauge plastics, then it's much more better. But how do you rethink, you know, for instance, delivery of milk in low income areas, or in our context where low value packaging is super useful in terms of it's a health precaution, and it's also a form of business and quality assurance. So it's one of those really hard conversations. Yeah, but we also need to minimize the amount of plastics that we're putting out there.
Yes, definitely. Too many plastics out there, and I totally agree with you. We need to reuse them and find different ways to make it possible. Okay, thank you very much. our last question today is going to be for Wair. Let's see. The question is, have you thought of scaling it up internationally, meaning your business? If so, are there any complications, especially since you're working with a circular model?
You want to?
Well, I can start off. But we ship worldwide, so of course we're already shipping to other countries, and of course we're looking into also selling our products or getting retailers in other countries. But yes, the whole take back program is also like, does it make sense to actually send it back to Denmark and then we send it back to our production, or like wherever we're gonna send it back to, so they can produce new soles. But yeah, we're looking much into the whole global industry, so we can work with that. We're very open towards that.
And I think it's like there are definitely challenges in terms of, like going international, in terms of like, when I don't think it's in terms of circularity. I think it's more the whole sustainability talk in terms of, like transportation distances and like how you do that, both in terms of where do we produce and where is our customers. And I think for a small startup like us, it doesn't make sense for us to have production in different parts of the world right now. But I think as we grow, we definitely also want to work with textile waste in other countries and kind of like establishing more local production that's closer to our customers. But right at this moment, it's, like we need to keep everything, like very small. But luckily, since, like the whole, courier system and works really well, it's quite easy for us to actually go international, at least with having the possibility for customers to buy all over the world. But I think it's also another question is, like how do we actually get the word out about Wair to the entire world? I think that's easier to do in Denmark and Scandinavia. So that's kind of like our next challenge.
Because we already know the market here.
Yeah. Getting to know another market is definitely difficult. But I do think that in terms of like acceptance of circular products, I think especially, for example, in Asia and in the US and like other countries, I think actually people are quite far. So I think it's only a matter of time before we can also start taking over those parts of the world. Maybe not taking over, but at least, like making an entrance in those markets as well.
Yeah.
Well, we are super excited to see Wair when you're an internationally acclaimed company. It's going to be amazing. Well, okay, thank you, everyone. This is going to be the end of our actual webinar session and our Q&A. And we want to thank all of our panelists, Zablon, Emma, Lili. Thank you so much for being here and for sticking with us through all of our technical difficulties today, but we appreciate it. And we appreciate our panelists for their time and expertise. Thank you so much. We hope to see you tomorrow at our next webinar. It is at 5 p.m. and we'll be talking about circular innovation stories. So we'll see you then.